Planetary defense. Planets are defended by planetary artillery, cannons that can fire into space at a distance where they can shoot down anything within the solar system. This system uses living math, time distortion, and gravitational technology. It fires a shot of gravitational manipulation that distorts anything into its own gravitational weight. As such, it can destroy anything. It uses living math to predict probability outcomes as a correction mechanism, so it is semi-homing and very difficult to avoid. And it uses time distortion to make all the mechanisms more accurate and faster. It also makes use of the NUS radar mechanism to target objects at nanosecond speeds, even beyond. The radar system creates a signal, notifying any operator, and encapsulates them inside a time distortion field so they can respond to any threats. As such, these turrets are semi-automated, but still need an operator for any unforeseeable equation. Its homing function is not that it auto-corrects itself, it's more a probability calculation. Where does it shoot to be most likely to hit? A raw calculation. And as the chute traverses, it continues to do that calculation. And as such, it always zooms in on the highest probability. No self-regulation is needed, just math continuing its calculation. It doesn't regulate its mistakes, as it has no self-regulating module. It just continues. It doesn't think I was wrong, or I need to correct this. It just makes use of all the probabilities inside its own extremely complicated mathematical function. NUS forces. The weakest member of NUS any forces may face is the militia of NUS, members for hire by a rich member inside NUS. They are usually equipped with special equipment and can sometimes be less so than that of the military. But sometimes, a rich member of NUS can equip their militia with equipment above military grade, such as gravity shields or even probability-bending tools. As such, they become far more dangerous. Then there are the NUS military members, who are better equipped. They are equipped with military-grade weaponry, considered the minimum for any unstoppable forces within NUS. This includes gravity and time manipulation weaponry, but also laser-based weaponry. They use goggles with living math, probability bending, and time perception technology. On their hand is a wrist gun, using living math targeting assistance and the ability to fire any type of function. All weaponry is inside the wrist gun, with targeting assistance faster in response to anything else, thanks to living math. NUS military members could be considered a similar strength to the super soldiers of the Federation, but some exceptional super soldiers will be stronger than any NUS soldier. Then there are the enforcement officers, usually equipped with the best NUS can offer. They will have probability manipulation, time manipulation, gravitational manipulation, biomanipulation, and resizing technology, anesthetic weaponry, laser weaponry, and gravitational shields. And depending on necessity, they might have even more than just that. Often, they will even have weaponized nanotechnology that can dismantle, cut, and anesthetize, which can be used as a spray gun. These tend to be stronger than any super soldier, and only the absolute best could defeat an enforcement officer. Gravitational tanks. These are even more powerful since their weight is so massive. Their gravitational shields are just as powerful. As such, a gravitational tank needs very little more than its shields. But even then, it is equipped with time distortion and gravitational distortion weaponry, also laser weaponry. And it is considered almost impossible to take down a gravitational tank. Then there is a warship, a spaceship. This is even more powerful than a gravitational tank, as it is based on similar principles, except it is not as heavy, but it is equipped with all weapons within the NUS arsenal. It also includes a very important piece of technology for orbital bombardment. Also in space combat, It makes use of living math to create completely unpredictable patterns that shift at speeds nothing can follow, making most attacks impossible to counter. Also, it's outside the range of most powerful weapons, so it's difficult to reach and actually shoot down. Its weapons can reach far and only be outmatched by planetary cannons. Lastly, the most powerful arsenal within NUS is the planetary cannons. These have the greatest range and the most powerful gravitational shoots. It is the only weapon that doesn't fall under the concept of smaller is better. As defending a planet is usually a top priority, spending a good amount of resources for an unstoppable weapon becomes no issue. But not all planets possess such cannons. Only the most valuable do. Tax-paying infrastructural work. All tax-paying jobs are hired through democratic voting systems and usually uses the minimal amount of workers as necessary, and all of this is calculated through living math. Emergency repair. Usually most reparations within a megacity are done by a customer paying for it. But under some exceptional emergency situations, there are emergency repair units that will repair any infrastructural damages, which mostly includes public property or unowned property, or property which could damage the entire city unless fixed. Living math operators, living math engineers, and living math measurers, all making sure the living math inside the democratic system functions and serves its intended function, making sure there is no corruption in the system. And even if these people are corrupt themselves, the math will show clear signs by its very nature. As such, these jobs are also under the influence of the democratic voting system, and the math itself can show any probability of its own corruption, and in that, it is easy to replace any corrupt workers within its own system, using the voting mechanisms. Because of its multi-layered nature, living math is incredibly difficult to corrupt, and even further so when consistently observed by the very democratic system itself, the people, the voters of society. Imagine if every voting room were observed on a constant live stream. It would make corruption incredibly difficult. Now imagine the living math inside the voting system, where equations compete and reality selects winners, where the sturdiest probability wins. No self-regulation, just selection. Meaning it would also leave clear signs when the math was tampered with, since any corruption would show up as a clearly lower probable result, giving honest feedback to the voters and the system itself. And it's important to note, the probability calculation is not the voting system. It's the safety mechanism inside the math itself, the contradictions making the math more powerful. The votes themselves are separate and protected by the living math. So the living math does two things in its calculations. It directly, carefully, and precisely counts votes, while detecting any corruption within its own system, when a contradiction did not contradict, meaning those numbers could have been tampered with. Imagine a perfect lie detector that will say when the voting system is lying. This would make it even more difficult for any corruption. As such, the NUS voting system and public living math function are uncorruptible in function. And the next layer is that the workers themselves work under different functions, making sure that there is no corruption. They have no chance of scheming and corrupting the system. And each layer is designed to make sure the others don't do anything they shouldn't. The measurers measure the consistency of the system. The operators make sure it functions. The engineers find the flaws and repair the system. If any fail in their job, they will quickly be observed by the other group. So there are three heavy and solid safety features of this system, making it practically impossible to corrupt. Probable, maybe. But when the very function itself is a probability function and calculation on a quantum level, anything probable becomes manageable. As such, the system is truly uncorruptible. Inside the schooling system, there are teachers and caretakers of the children. This is usually the most straining job, and also enforcement officers. Besides all of this, everything else is not covered by taxes, meaning the structural integrity of your water supplies is your own concern. As one example. But there are companies that offer these services. They are simply not paid by the tax system. Jobs. Most jobs lay under one of these categories: entertainment, design, science, or infrastructure, as they are the job categories that tend to still be meaningful inside NUS, where infrastructure tends to be the less useful job, as science has usually replaced most of those functions. Science has become the most useful job category, as it is the only job that truly affects society. For example, firefighters have easily been replaced by safety systems inside most homes of NUS. And because their technology is so advanced, most of these systems are entirely reliable and tend to work indefinitely, almost. As such, that should show a clear contrast between the infrastructural work and scientific work, as their place within society of NUS and entertainment and design tend to be in between and very close to each other in their meaningfulness within NUS. Lower echelons life. The daily life of a member in the lower echelons is the most typical life. It involves debt management every day, infrastructural repairs, that cost, food that costs, and a home that costs. Everything costs, but no job. Usually, they have the most essential thing needed within society: wrist hologram for communication, internet access, and data. It's used for credits and other things. It's important in any management within NUS. Without a wrist hologram, it's impossible to find a job or even function inside society, since everything is in the wrist hologram. Wall projectors tend to also be a necessity for any important news and access to the open media. But it isn't fully necessary. So some lower members of NUS society only have the wrist hologram, others have the wall projector as well. Luckily, the internet is free in NUS, and everything goes through internet access and is free in that sense. Since it is a very cheap and easy to maintain technology inside NUS, it makes little sense to even commercialize it, as it is basically self-maintained. Each device automatically connects wirelessly instantly to each other, using the technology that's already inside each device, and storage is so manageable that each device can store most information within itself, sharing it to the internet. News outlets earn their income through commercials, but the lower classes still tend to struggle, as the cost of their property and its repairs, security, and safety is their responsibility entirely, as they usually live in half-broken or small apartments between the support pillars of the entire megacity on the lowest levels. Since the megacity relies on the pillars themselves as load-bearing, most people don't have issues with the decaying homes on the lower levels. As long as they are away from the main roads, they usually have no or little furniture. But as they develop families, they tend to change that and prioritize their family's well-being. Crimes tend to happen, but most tend to avoid it. Criminal punishment can cause extreme damage to any lower members within society. Middle echelons life. This is where people usually tend to find jobs. Either the middle class gains jobs involving taxes, or less important jobs, such as infrastructural jobs. One example is that some middle-class members shrink themselves so their cost of living is lessened. And then they serve infrastructural assistance through call centers. Though those middle-class members who remain normal-sized are considered lucky, since they got jobs that are not easy to get. Or they get jobs that are difficult to keep, such as the tax-paying jobs. And in those cases, they still feel the heavy burden of the debt market hunting them. But their stable economy greatly improves their everyday life, They can live in fully secure, safe, and comfortable apartments with decent sizes. They can usually afford the more luxurious things, such as simulators, healthcare, and even gadgets from scientists and designer objects from designers. In some cases, they could even save money for their own transportation, such as gravity buggies. But this is a big investment, but definitely possible for a middle-class member. They can afford to enjoy life, although they are still close to the grasp of the debt market. Since their life is comfortable and in a limbo state, where they are safe but still feel the grasp of the debt market, they tend to not have children, or very few. Some are even being careful so that their economy isn't burdened by children. One of the most stable jobs, or best jobs a middle-class member can have, is that of an enforcement officer, as it requires high skill, and once that is established, they tend to stay in that role. Higher echelons life. The rich amongst NUS society are usually more involved in the stock market, or debt market, or investments of some sort. It's no longer a matter of enjoying life. It's more. They can have whatever they want and whenever. They live on top of the megacity and are the only members of NUS who can truly have their own unique homes developed. They are the only member of NUS with the rights to build whatever home they want, as they own free and open property areas on top of the megacity. As such, changing and building their houses doesn't affect the structural integrity of the megacity. They have everything. But they are also the exact members of society that become slaves to their own depravities. As they can have anything and everything, their appreciation for what they have slowly eroded. As such, they are difficult to deal with, in an emotional sense, difficult to connect with, and tend to be either very job-focused or alone, usually both. But on some rare occasions, some higher echelon members do find true companionship. And when they do, they have more children than any other echelon, because they tend to live longer. Sometimes they also tend to be more lustful, and as such, produce many children, and feel safe enough to do so without any risks associated. The members of the higher echelons tend to have many different machines, such as their own shrinking machine. Basically, since they are very active in the debt market, they have all the necessary machines to make use of everything they buy. Rich inequality. Even among the higher echelons, there are great differences in wealth. Some can afford to be on top of a megacity. Others can afford to own their own planets in complete solitude. As such, the power scaling between those in the higher echelons can greatly differ. Everyday technology. Most of NUS technology has small and easy-to-use versions, usually formed like a syringe gun. When it comes to lasers, time distortion, gravity distortion, resizing, and biological manipulation technology for civilian use. But time perception and probability technology tend to be used through goggles or other types of headgears. All of this is still used as tools in everyday life and jobs.
Resources.
Resources inside NUS are usually bought from private owners. As an example, if enforcers need more weapons, using tax money, resources will be bought from the specific company that makes those weapons. And in return, that company economy is protected by the enforcers through collection of debts, so that return of investment always stays stable. This way, companies inside NUS have very low risks in their investments, which is why the enforcement offices are valuable to them. In fact, all tax-paying jobs are utterly important. Some are just incredibly good investors, living on managing resources, buying them, and keeping them in orbit. This is yet another way the debt market serves the economy, as some buy debts relating to resources, manage them so they earn from them when people are in need of resources. In this way, NUS has very stable management of return on investment, which is why their society grows and evolves with such success. Shops. Some people buy small apartments on the lower levels, usually close to roads and transportation areas. So their shops are visible, and they turn it into a shop, where they can sell things specific to their craft. Sometimes it's a success, and sometimes it's a failure. Another function that tends to be successful is storage areas, which people offer for a certain monthly sum. As they turn apartments into storage areas, which can often be of great service to them, or even as a sold service to others. Transportation. In NUS, most things are traded directly between people. As such, transportation is usually done through those who can afford to buy gravity trucks and sell their services, transporting goods between buyers. And each city possesses roads inside them for these trucks, so transportation and trade can be maintained between cities, each leading to storage areas inside megamarkets. And each megamarket possesses an area for flying machines to arrive on for interstellar trade. And these megamarkets are maintained through taxes and the infrastructural maintenance of the emergency repair workers. Goods retrieved from the megamarket are usually transported with gravitational lifts, machines that can lift up cargo and transport it. Any resources relating to industrial or scientific centers can easily be transported directly to those areas, as roads tend to lead to these places. As such, gravity trucks with these resources tend to go directly to the industrial building or the scientific centers and load off their cargo there. Megamarkets. Most goods are bought and sold through the megamarkets. They serve as a market where people can physically buy things. Also, they are the hub for most trades. And anyone buying things through the most common method, through the internet, will pay an extra fee and have it easily delivered to their home from the mega market. People can buy a portion of the trading hub as such a portion of the mega market, and they can use it for anything: postal work, groceries, anything. And whatever they sell will be shown on the internet, on the official market website. But a portion of the market is reserved for the enforcement offices as a place to deliver market goods. The entire market is supported by my semi-automated systems using living math. This exact math also calculates if there are too much or too little of any type of goods. So the mega market is always designed to have what people need. Delay could vary depending on if the resources people need come from inside the city or outside. But usually, those who own that specific market inside the mega market tend to be efficient and have any necessary resources already stocked. If you want groceries, as an example, those responsible for that would usually be stocked up with what you need. Internet. The Internet of NUS isn't just planetary. Using time distortion technology, the Internet of NUS extends through their entire occupied areas. It bends the speed of their internet signal, so it's almost instantaneous, so they can easily maintain contact with other colonies. School. Kids inside NUS are born into a family, but should always be registered to the schooling system. Failing in this is considered illegal and could be punished severely, usually through a high fine that can easily result in debt collection. As such, kids should be registered so they can be protected by the legal system of NUS, which is taking it to the highest seriousness. In this sense, freedom is still an amendment inside NUS, which means, even when registered, kids are not forced to live at the school and can leave as they wish. So even if they are registered, it is common that kids still have a relationship with their parents. But it's also usually very short-lived, as the life expectancy of their parents is very low. Some kids never even remembering their parents. Though to encourage children to live at school, the NUS schooling system tends to offer kids more than just protection. They offer comfort in its many different ways. Food, entertainment, study, everything kids could need. They are also free to study as they wish. Teachers are hired and offer the kids any help in their development, but only when the kids want it. Most of the NUS taxes go to the schooling system itself. NUS has a very liberal educational system. It has a high level of success for a few. Those whose very nature draws them to understanding things and seeking knowledge tend to succeed within the NUS schooling system, as it encourages the child's own nature and desire to understand, which is more potent than any forced understanding. This is another reason why NUS has highly successful scientists, as NUS is good at nurturing that natural drive towards science. Once the kids are 16, they are resigned from the schooling system, thrown out into society with complete indifference, as they are then considered adults, and thus should be at their useful age or useless, and will have a usual lifespan of about 6 years to either rise or fall within the NUS society. Factories and research centers. Usually, these are built as additions on the outskirts of a megacity, and resources needed are transported by gravity trucks directly to these factories or scientific centers. Transportation inside a megacity. There are many walkways up above, like small bridges, but also down on the ground. There are elevators to lead up to the higher levels, or if you are on the higher levels, it will lead down. Horizontal escalators. These are the public transportation that will allow people to stand, even sit, using foldable chairs on the side. These are the most common form of transportation, and they have different stops where you can jump off and on. So it will slow down and stop at every stop. Then there are gravity bikes, for those who have specific places to travel to. Also, if there is a need for cargo, these bikes can hold a certain small amount of cargo. They function similarly to any gravity vehicle, distorting time and gravity to move at high speed with high control. But they are small and narrow, so they are well suited for inner-city transportation. Garage. To store any vehicles, people usually buy an apartment on the lower levels, where they can install garage doors and store their vehicles. Sometimes, they may do the same for gravity bikes, but on a higher level. But some also just keep their gravity bikes inside their houses, as it is easy to get them through a normal door. Democracy. Usually the wrist hologram can easily be used for the democratic voting system, where you can vote on absolutely anything, from the smallest detail inside society. But there is also an alternate way to vote. For those without a wrist hologram, there are public voting machines. These can be found in the public area of a mega market. If you want to change the water fountain, as an example, you just go to the voting machine, write it in, and it's registered. Or if you want to change the law or change any public servant, you'll just write it down into the machine. Megacity construction. Usually they are built with a general all-purpose blueprint, so they can be constructed and used anywhere. As such, the blueprint makes them usually always the same, easy to use, easy to develop, with a clear infrastructure. Simple in a way, but that's also the point. They are simple, so they can easily be deployed and used. And from there, grow. And when entering a foreign megacity, it's not too complicated, so you can easily and quickly navigate foreign megacities, making the global and galactic use of megacities easier and more fluid, as they can cooperate better with each other, and how they are built and how they are funded. Usually when a population grows, they build further upon their current megacity. But it's also a sign that they can't hold more population. Because of the incredible growth rate of NUS, any sign of additional habitation means they need to emigrate people. As such, the rich usually encourage voting to fund new megacities with the use of taxation. If such votes fail, the rich themselves tend to agree on directly paying for new megacities. And in these procedures, NUS tends to look for valuable planets or areas on currently occupied planets. So the new megacity will produce wealth, which will further help society. As such, the cost of a megacity can be regained through the potential in its new earnings. Even though the rich don't get directly paid by such expansions, the growth in the economy indirectly rewards them for it. As you have to realize, inflation doesn't function the same here. When they get more resources inside their economy, even if it's unbalanced, the value of their currency isn't harmed. No, they simply get more resources to use. The more resources they can use, the more technology they can produce. This means they have more things. Credits account for this. It's not just arbitrary money. It's a direct measurement of all NUS possesses. Much more accurate than GDP, as GDP often accounts for supply and demand. NUS currency directly accounts for supply, and the merchant accounts for demand. GDP accounts for other things, such as what value something has within that country specifically. Credits only account for the resources themselves. It's a raw measurement of the direct resources. No global trade influence. Since NUS owns everything, all it has to measure is the resource itself. But this does not mean services are not still paid for inside NUS, nor that supply and demand do not exist. But rather, they exist outside the currency value itself. So keeping that in mind, expansions like this never harm the NUS economy, as it has developed something that directly measures resources as the health of an economy. So even if the rich pay for expansions, they usually get the return of that investment in a more indirect manner. So credits can be added to accommodate any extra costs, such as transportation. But the service itself is never a measurement of the currency itself. It's just an added cost, which a self-sufficient economy like NUS can do. And this can function because NUS doesn't need to measure its economy compared to another country. It doesn't need to know the value of a service compared to another country. Nor does it need to know the price of a commodity compared to another country. They all share the same economy, where GDP tries to account for many different economical natures. Because of this economical function inside NUS, the rich always expand, as they will earn from expansions, but lose from overpopulation inside their own city. So, as a megacity reaches that threshold, its economy will be influenced. It will take a short-term economical blow. But after a while, it will usually stabilize, with a consistent flow of emigration and the creation of new megacities. And this can be considered the maturity of a megacity, where it reaches a point where it is intertwined entirely with the flow of NUS. So it's a necessity the rich can never ignore. And in this sense, the rich have great responsibility for their own city, and, in rare cases, can be overburdened by it. This can result in them falling into the debt market's grasp. But from this greater network of trade, some of the richer members gain more power and more access. The more megacities there are, the more wealth there is inside NUS. The more wealth there is, the more potential there is. And this potential some can utilize, and those who benefit from it will seek further expansions. As such, they develop into those very rich people who are willing to fund new expansions. So either the rich are trapped in the megacity, rich but not enough to leave, so they fund new megacities to save theirs. Or they benefit so greatly from expansion, so they want to fund them. Colonization projects. When exploring for new expansions, NUS tends to use colonial cities, where they send smaller and cheaper projects to find suitable and beneficial places for their expansions. As a misplaced megacity can become a burden. As such, NUS has expanded into many planets, but most of them are just inhabited by small colonial cities that were never considered worthy. as colonial cities function in two ways: to make sure a megacity is a worthy investment, and to explore the best options for megacity deployment. And the reproduction rate inside a colonial city tends to be different, as they don't suffer from the same competitive and harsh environment as megacities do. Extraction. When extracting resources from the Earth or the planet, they use machines and tools that are based on gravitational and laser technology. Using these two, they can easily extract resources, and then transport them using gravity trucks and gravity lifts, using gravity platforms to levitate up and down inside mines, in different sizes, from small to sometimes in the size to hold multiple gravity trucks. These operations tend to be done by people who have the tools and the understanding of how to do it. Private people extracting the resources and then selling them on the market. Usually, it's a company specialized in such extractions. These extraction operations usually also involve asteroids and meteoroids. As such, a planet's value is not just based on what's on the planet, but what's close by. Even though NUS can easily travel to distant places to mine asteroids, planets, and such, having it in close proximity makes the management easier, and too much travel using starships will affect its navigation system. As such, it can cost. So having things close by is beneficial. Heavy industry. When it comes to heavy machinery, big industries, which most societies need in some way. This is something that is done by private, rich people. They are the ones who can afford to buy the machinery needed for bigger tasks. Most technology inside NUS is tiny enough and powerful enough to have no real meaning, like big and powerful machines. But transportation, storage, sorting, and so on, there is still things that requires big buildings and big management. For extraction work as an example, trucks need to be managed and stored. Also, sorting machines for such large cargoes will in themselves also be large machines. If smelting is involved, then that will also involve big furnaces. Nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is also a very useful piece of technology inside NUS. As it helps production, with small detailed mechanisms, it constructs and forms materials. If biomanipulation constructs and manipulates the biology at its tiniest level, then nanotechnology often does the same, but for the mechanical, metallic, mineral, and non-biological. Though it still often assists in operations using biomanipulation, assisting in the smaller details. Nanotechnology usually makes use of small robotic components that can assist in smaller details. These small nanorobots are usually controlled through a computer, depending on how accurate the operation needs to be, either a tablet that can easily be portable or a full setup stationary computer will be used. The stationary computers will possess greater accuracy, as they will have more computational tools installed into them. But tablets are usually more beneficial when the operator needs to be flexible. Controlling nanotechnology could be considered on par with what would be brain surgery in modern days. It requires a high level of skill. And the nanomachines themselves are usually contained like a paste inside a syringe gun, easily applied to their desired operational area, with a return signal so they can easily be extracted again. But nanotechnology can also be used on an industrial level, where they are programmed to follow a pattern and make processing easier, quicker, and more precise. In these circumstances, the nanorobots are not controlled by an operator and are instead made automated, not as precise, but in an industrial sense, very precise still. Probability technology. In NUS, there is a very powerful piece of technology. It's called the probability technology. It relates to the probability threads, but its most common use is not that. The most common use of probability technology is something more akin to increasing your luck, where the technology calculated probabilities and aligns them so that the most beneficial outcomes are drawn forth. This is incredibly powerful, as people who have access to this technology can physically increase their luck. In combat, it's even more powerful. But in everyday life, it's also still very powerful, preventing bad investments, avoiding bad outcomes, and things of that nature. Something like a safety net for those who can afford it. It's a chip that needs to be placed close to the brain so that its probability bending can influence the user's perception of the world. In that perception, probability is bent. In an everyday normal life sense, it's like having super luck. It's yet another reason why NUS can grow the way they do, another layer to their safety mechanisms, making sure their economy and societal health never corrode. Living math technology. This technology is based on finding the truth and then quantifying it. As an example, what is the most likely coordinate to hit the target? And then it will produce a number for a targeting system. What is the likelihood of this system being corrupt in a percentage, and it will create a number between 0 and 100. Or what is the cost of this human's life? It will tell the most reliable truth in numbers. And these numbers can be fed to basically any machine. And the way it does so is to calculate probability itself, which is what all the contradictions inside its function are designed to do. The more it contradicts itself, the more it will produce the most reliable probabilities. As an example, when it uses probability, it's not saying this is most likely based on linear math. It can calculate superpositions into their finest detail, predict probabilities as if they were split into multiple layers of reality, and come back with predictions based on all those layers, as if it had tried each possibility all at once. But it's all just math, so it produces nothing else but numbers, which can be fed into any system. Although this is complicated in nature, it can also still answer simple questions, like what is 1 plus 1? As when each contradictory equation inside it will all give the same answer, simply by the simplicity of that question. So it is a math that can solve any truth, from simple to the most complex, but only with numbers. Although not all living math functions are the same, each one needs to be specifically designed for the task it's supposed to do, since its task always needs to be translated into math. Debt market. Inside the debt market, living math does multiple things. First, it calculates the potential value of any income. Let's say resources are used for an investment. The living math calculates that potential income. As such, any investment has a debt threshold. The same would apply for any investment, such as a human life. The total potential value is calculated, and once the debt threshold is reached, the debt is deemed beyond repayable, and the asset will be registered into the debt market. So it shifts from the open market into the debt market. Everything with a price inside the investment is calculated and measured and given a value that maximizes the return on investment. Once that threshold has been reached, the living math then calculates the desirability of that which has been lost, the resources and everything within the debt that has a value. From that desirability, two things are calculated: the potential time it will take for this to be sold, and the most likely potential return on investment. So it will calculate time and price for the debt inside the debt market. Then it will estimate a benchmark. What could be the most potential return on investment? Maybe even one that results in the investment actually earning extra income from the debt. It also estimates the absolute lowest potential return on investment. From there, it creates a graph, one that shows the tension between these calculations. When the numbers indicate it's closer to the guaranteed to be sold end, or when they indicate maximum return on investment. And it shows this graph by calculating probability, but also by directly measuring people's interests inside the market. More interest heightens the graph, less interest lowers it. Because of probability calculations, The graph knows automatically by utilizing the probability realm as a calculation. How interesting is this? As the graph is shown until the debt is fully bought based on the graph's current valued estimate. A buyer can purchase the debt through the stock market's website. Debt assets inside the debt market also include information, allowing the buyer to research their purchase before buying. Once bought, the debt is collected and delivered to the mega market by enforcement officers, where the buyer can collect it. Probability realm. The probability realm functions like this. Each thing you could have done is a probability. Each moment, each function, everything within reality possesses a potential, something that could have been. Something could have been this, or it could have been that. All of those branch out. As such, we are constantly surrounded by a functionally infinite potential. This is the probability realm. But it's not just what could have been. No, it's the fact that everything exists simultaneously and is only realized as it is observed. Let's say you could observe one of the unobservable probabilities and forget one of the observed probabilities. You could physically alter probabilities. You could bypass the collapse of the observed and enter the realm of the unobserved. And that's when we truly enter the probability realm. Now scale it to a cosmic scale, where it's not just your probabilities, but those of the entirety of the universe. You can influence probability elements beyond your own probabilities. Though, even at this scale, the probability realm possesses its own physics, just like gravity, just like how you can't just walk up into the air. But let's share an example of what these probabilities can do. Let's say you are thinking about something, but you never say it. Well, in one adjacent probability, you accidentally said it aloud. As such, it can literally produce something akin to mind reading. So the capabilities of the probability realm should most definitely not be underestimated. Societal power balance. Inside NUS, there are many types of influences: economical, democratic, social, and media. So let's explain the power dynamics. Just like in a stock market, there is more than one owner of a company, but some hold more sway than others. This is a natural phenomenon that exists within NUS in all its layers. NUS is still democratic, so even amongst the powerful, there are disagreements that are solved through democratic procedures. But those who possess greater influence over the public, through media as an example, will hold greater sway over democratic voting. But those with greater influence over economic flow will possess their own presence with power dynamics, capable of forcing those with influence to submit to their needs. As an example, someone with great assets within a company can sway those with less, even if they don't have more democratic voting power. So even if much inside NUS may seem mechanical, it's still a very fluid system, ruled by each individual human's wants and desires. Although it's more rare, some are so rich they can ignore these power dynamics, as they can buy their own planet, create their own industries, and own everything entirely themselves. But the most common influence inside NUS is those who have to play within this specific power dynamic, as owning your own company means you have no other members to sway your power over. As such, even the richest members of society, if they want to have any democratic sway, need to participate in the power dynamic games. End point. Although the rich can play with society to this extent, even they are slaves to the very system. Even they are prey to the debt market, as even the members of the higher echelons eventually fall to the debt market. Nothing lasts forever, and eventually even the successful make one mistake, or maybe another, or they make a huge mistake. Meaning even the rich can be subject to the debt market. One example is, if a megacity overpopulates, too many people in one place for too few resources, harming the simple structure that makes the megacities function on a galactic scale. In these extreme situations, The rich members, who are bound to those cities, can easily become victims of economic collapse within their city and victims of a debt wave and be sold on the market. It is important to note that megacities are fragile in this sense, but usually they are still sustained because of clever people finding solutions, which NUS have many of. Or they could be extremely unlucky, even with probability bending, as they become victims to a much more powerful probability, thus losing their investments, going into unredeemable debt, and being sold to the market. So even if the rich live long and successful lives, much longer than what is a normal lifespan, they are still prey to the debt market. Even rich members who buy their own planet and live in solitude, free from the risks, live in another form of risk, where they have no support from NUS infrastructure or economy, solidifying their assets, meaning if anything were to happen to those assets, destroyed, they would lose everything, potentially dying by themselves, poor, or being found and reintegrated into NUS and possibly sold to the debt market. General public. Most people are undereducated, so they tend to lack necessary decision-making skills to make things better for themselves inside society. Some think they can succeed inside a free market, just to realize how highly competitive it truly is. As youth tend to be the much more dominant demographic within this society, so are naive choices. And this is the biggest influence on the NUS democratic voting system, lacking education and young naivety, where even when the harsh truth hits them, they are still swayed by societal norms. Things like this are what cement the nature of NUS. Human selfishness and arrogance enforce it even further. Even if people are well educated and older, they can often make poor decisions and bad voting choices. In NUS, this is taken even further, with a lack of education within most. Vastly most voters are so young that they have not outgrown their own naivety. As such, richer members, older members of society, can easily influence the public. But this does not mean the rich are an oligarchy that controls society. It's more like all the rich naturally want society to be the way it is, as it offers them the freedom they want. So it's just natural mechanics, where the rich will encourage the youth to maintain society as it is. And each individual member of the higher echelons has their own agenda and their own will. And in that sense, they are still a democratic system, just that those with more influence can sway the democratic voting more than those with less influence. Freedom within NUS. Inside NUS, you have as much freedom as you can afford. If you can buy a starship, you can travel to the stars. If you are rich enough, you can obtain the best equipment NUS can offer. A private person can own planetary artillery if they want to. They sometimes do, but usually such defenses are a communal investment. But some are rich enough to buy even the most expensive equipment on their own. And anyone has the freedom to become that rich. The law, the amendments, and the very system leave full freedom to attempt it.